So I've seen many people often state about the differences in comedy between the UK and the USA. In fact, I saw a great video from The Closer Look who discussed this very topic. And I always wondered, is that the case? Because certainly for the older generations that may be true, but nowadays with the American media and Hollywood dominating television and movies, it's very easy for us in the UK to develop a more Americanized sense of humour. I remember up until very recently I'd seen more episodes of How I Met Your Mother, Brooklyn Nine-Nine and The Big Bang Theory than I ever saw of Red Dwarf or Blackadder. So I decided to come up with a little experiment that I was going to undertake. So I watched 2 episodes of 3 different American comedies and 3 different UK comedies. The US comedies I'm watching are Parks and Recreations, Brooklyn Nine-Nine and The American Office. And the British comedies I'm going to be watching are Red Dwarf, The IT Crowd and the UK version of The Office. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch the very first episode of each of these shows, and then I've used a random number generator to pick a random episode from any season of the show as well. Because often in these shows the pilot gives a very good indication of the groundwork that's been put in. However, it usually takes a few seasons for the shows to get their niche and to really develop their sense of comedy. I'm now going to discuss each show in depth and then go I'll do in 1v1 style, and then I'll end up saying which show I end up thinking is better out of the UK or the US, and we will finally be able to maybe identify why some people like UK humour more than US humour. Now obviously this goes without saying, but I'm a British person, so I may be slightly biased, but at the same time many people in the US never even watch any sort of UK comedy. In fact, there's probably a sizable portion of people in the US that never even knew that The Office started in the UK. Now, I could have done other shows like the Inbetweeners, but I really couldn't bring myself to watch any episodes of the US Inbetweeners, so we're just going to stick with these 3 shows.
Bye, Wendy.
Bye, nobody.
Now, the first head-to-head we've got is Parks and Recreation versus Red Dwarf. Now, Parks and Rec I'd seen once. I saw the first episode once and then never really started watching it again. Not because I didn't like it particularly, I just preferred watching other things like drama. But I remember watching this season 1, episode 1, and then the random episode that was selected was season 1, episode 5. And both of these episodes I thought were very funny. Now, there were parts that were a bit tough to watch, especially for me, because I always really struggle to watch cringe humour sort of things, and anything that's uncomfortable really makes me feel almost unwell with how cringy it is. Now, the very first episode where the character of Tom meets the character of Anne made me feel extremely uncomfortable. As well, in season 1, episode 5, which was the random episode that I selected, I also felt very, very uncomfortable during Leslie's speech. But I was pleasantly surprised because even for the very first episode, this show was very funny in a number of ways. Now, it never made me really laugh out loud. I did have a few of those moments, but I think it was more situational humour than actual gags in the show. You know, they don't say funny lines. They have more like the whole situation, which is comedic. Which means that they're a lot more slow burn and a lot more, well, not subtle, but not as in your face as maybe some of the jokes from other shows. All in all, I thought this show was incredibly entertaining, and if you're one of the few people who hasn't watched Parks and Rec for some reason, I'd highly recommend watching it because it was a very entertaining show. Red Dwarf is a perfect example of a show that is opposite for Parks and Recreation, because Parks and Rec, as I said before, is made up of predominantly situational comedy, whereas Red Dwarf is mainly based on gags and one-liners. Another thing that's very different is most of the cast in Parks and Recreation are established within the first couple of episodes. In Red Dwarf, we are introduced to the 3 main characters in the first episode. However, the cat, who was one of the main characters, is only really introduced at the very end, like last 5 minutes of the show of episode 1. Crichton, who in my opinion is probably the funniest character on the entire show, isn't properly introduced as part of the ensemble cast until season 3. Now, he does appear in the very first episode of season 2, but then he sort of disappears and isn't reintroduced until season 3, as I said. Season 3 through to season 6 are the seasons that I would class as most entertaining and the most funny. That's the main cast of Rimmer, Lister, the cat, and Crichton. In season 7, Rimmer ends up leaving to become Ace, which is like a whole subplot. And the trio is left only momentarily before Christine Kachansky, who was Lister's former lover, rejoins the crew. Now, she's not necessarily bad, I just don't think she's as funny as Rimmer. Rimmer was always the punching bag and the punchline for a lot of the jokes, and with Christine Kachansky, who's a very intelligent, attractive woman, it just doesn't work the same way as someone who has been built up to be so comedically flawed as Rimmer. Now, again, I didn't really have a lot of laugh out loud moments within the episodes I was watching, but again, there are some very memorable lines, and that's probably because I am, again, as I said, biased. I've watched Red Dwarf completely the way through a few times. But out of the episodes I've watched, I'd say that the 2 episodes of Parks and Rec, I'd say, were arguably funnier in a shorter period of time. However, something else that I noticed was that the writing in Red Dwarf is a lot better, because there's no real cringe humor used in Red Dwarf, which is something that I can really appreciate, which is why I can't watch things like The Office or The Inbetweeners, because they rely heavily on these sort of awkward moments where the whole joke is, haha, look, everyone's silent because they don't know what to say. Also, I'd like to point out that I think the whole premise of the story in Red Dwarf is far better than it is in Parks and Recreations, because we've seen mockumentary style comedies done before, obviously with both versions of The Office. Whilst it's definitely different and it's definitely funny, and you can't really say that it's a rip-off of The Office, I wouldn't say it's anything groundbreaking. And the premises of episodes are kind of very grounded in reality, but thanks to Red Dwarf being an absurd sci-fi comedy, it's way easier for the writers of Red Dwarf to be able to create more outlandish stories. And in fact, a lot of the times the jokes in the show all relate around how absurd the story is. It's quite self-aware in that regard, and it relies on this aura of the audience being able to understand that what's going on is really sarcastic and stupid, whereas Parks and Recreation often has to tell you that through the character monologues that you get throughout the episodes. Now, of course, Red Dwarf does have laugh tracks. Well, not laugh tracks, but it does have a live studio audience throughout the show. So that kind of removes a bit of the punch for me, I guess is a good way to say it. Because whilst I do tend to laugh more at episodes with laugh tracks in, I'm fully aware that that's probably because I'm hearing other people laughing and laughter is contagious. And I'm sure if Parks and Recreation added a laugh track into their episodes, they'd get a lot more laughs than what they probably do currently. But all in all, I'm going to have to give this point to Red Dwarf. Now again, as I said, I'm biased. I'm trying to be as subjective as possible. But from the episodes I've seen, the story progress is far more compelling in the UK show than it was in the US show. Now again, obviously they're very differently molded shows, and I guess I can really only go off my personal preference, but they're both very funny shows. Parks and Recreation seriously surprised me because I thought it was going to be like a How I Met Your Mother or a Brooklyn Nine-Nine, or God forbid even a Big Bang Theory, where it's going to be sort of, the jokes aren't going to be as funny, but it's going to be more about like you wanting to watch for the characters. But Parks and Recreation I thought was a lot more funny, and actually from what I've seen, I thought that those episodes of Parks and Rec were almost funnier than a lot of the episodes of The Office that I've seen. Both Offices actually, but we'll get onto those later. Okay, so now we've moved on to round 2, and in this round we have Brooklyn Nine-Nine versus the IT Crowd. So first off, I went with Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so I watched the very first episode, and then the random number generator selected Season 3, Episode 1. Now, I have seen the entirety of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so I know how the show goes, and the story as a whole is very interesting. It's a lot like Red Dwarf. I'm often more invested in the characters within the show than I am in the actual jokes of the show. And that's not to say it's not funny, it definitely does have some good lines. But it's more situation-based and physical than anything else. We move on to the IT Crowd. Now again, it does have a live studio audience, which does affect the viewing experience. A lot of the jokes in the first episode were very swing and miss. Not all of them landed. The story that Moss told about the time that they picked up prostitutes was very funny. Moss is essentially just British Sheldon, that's just sort of what he is. And Moss is really the only funny character in the entire show. Jen is sort of the straight man, kind of, but not really. And the other guy, I don't even fucking remember his name. Moss is the only real funny one, played by Richard Ayoade. Now, I think that's just testament to how brilliant Richard Ayoade is as a comedian. But the other episode that was selected was season 2, episode 5, which was called Friend Face, which is about a social media app, which is kind of a parody of Facebook, and they end up sort of all telling false stories about their life. It does have sort of a political or social undercurrent to it, which I thought was kind of cringe. And the whole end scene where Moss is talking about made up stuff about Jen in order to pick her up in front of her friends is funny because it backfires on Jen. But I feel like the joke was really prolonged, and I guess that's kind of the joke of the show. It's very sarcastic and self-aware, but this joke definitely went on for too long in my opinion. Now, I'd say out of the 2 episodes I saw, I'd probably say that I laughed more watching the IT Crowd. However, I thought as an actual TV show, I thought that Brooklyn Nine-Nine maybe was more entertaining at points. However, seeing as this is a battle of comedy, I'm probably going to have to go with the UK on this one again. Okay, so the final showdown between UK and USA came down to the versions of The Office. I chose to watch the US version first, and, well, it was entertaining, but not for the right reasons, because after I watched the first episode of the US series, and then went back and watched the first episode of the UK series, I realised they didn't just steal the name of the show, the entire first episode is the exact same. I mean, down to dialogue, it's the exact same. The story about Dwight getting his car fixed up.
Whoa, watch out for this guy. Dwight Schrute in the building. This is Ryan, the new temp.
What's up?
Nice to meet you. Introduce yourself, be polite.
Dwight Schrute, assistant regional manager.
Assistant to the regional manager. So, Dwight, tell him about the kung fu and the car and everything.
Yeah, I got a 78 280Z. I bought it for $1,200, fixed it up, so now we're $3,000.
That is his profit.
Yeah. New engine, suspension, I got a respray, I got some photos.
Oh, careful. What's this one? Gareth Keenan in the area.
Looking new temp. Introduce yourself. Good to see you.
Gareth Keenan, assistant regional manager.
Assistant to the regional manager. Gareth's my right hand man, immediately beneath me. Oh, as an actor said to a bishop. No, he's not. I'm not. Do you know about your car and your kung fu and everything?
Yeah, I got a TR3, bought it for $1,200. Done it up, now it's worth $3,000.
Profit on that.
New suspension, new engine.
Just a wreck.
Respray. I've got some
Do it himself.
The whole pranking Pam bit.
Oh, hey, do you like the Jamie Kennedy experiment?
Yeah.
And Punk'd and all that kind of stuff?
Okay. You were gonna be my accomplice. Just go along with it, okay?
All right.
Just follow my lead. Don't pimp me, all right? Come in. So, corporate just said that I don't want to. Oh, thank you, Pam. Pam, can you come in here for a sec? Just have a seat. I was gonna call you in anyway. You know Ryan. As you know, there's going to be downsizing, and you have made my life so much easier in that I am going to have to let you go first.
What? Why?
Why? Well, theft and stealing.
Stealing?
Mm-hmm.
What am I supposed to have stolen?
Post-it notes.
Post-it notes?
Yeah, God.
What are those worth, like 50 cents?
50 cents, yeah. You steal 1,000 Post-it notes at 50 cents a piece, and, you know, you've made a profit margin. You know, gonna run us out of business, Pam.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I am.
I can't believe this. I mean, I've never even stolen as much as a paperclip, and now you're firing me.
But the best thing about it is that we're not gonna have to give you any severance pay. Because that is gross misconduct, and so just clean out your desk. I'm sorry. You've been ex-punk! Surprise! It's a joke! We were joking around! See? Okay, he was in on it. He was my accomplice. And there was just kind of a morale booster thing. And we were showing the new guy around, kind of giving him the feel of the place. So, we totally got you.
You're a jerk.
I don't know about that.
Come in. And then the head office said, yeah, so that'll be
Absolutely.
Thanks. Don't go, Dawn. Can you put up a chair? I was going to call you anyway. I need a quick word. As you are aware, there are going to be redundancies, and you've made my life easier, in as much as I'm going to have to let you go first.
What? Why?
Why? Stealing. Thieving.
Thieving?
Yeah.
What am I meant to have stolen?
Post-it notes.
Post-it notes. What are they worth? About 12p?
Oh, got your Bible on you, Ricky?
No.
Thou shalt not steal, and this is only worth 12p. You steal 1,000 post-it notes at 12p, and you've made profit.
Why would I steal post-it notes?
You know, to make the little things on the end of joints.
Roaches.
Call you a drug addict. No, just...
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I can't... God. I've never stolen as much as a paperclip and you're firing me.
And the good news is, I don't need to give you any severance pay because it's gross misconduct. So you can go straight away. Oh, now. That was the joke there. Good girl. That's a joke you do. Well done, settling in. Practical jokes for the good. Thanks for these, check them out. I'll do these now, actually.
You wanker.
Come on.
You're such a sad little man.
Am I? Didn't know that.
The whole putting the phone on speaker and then the guy says something inappropriate, like all of this is the exact same. And I get that they changed it later on, but you can't just make the same jokes. I know it's got the same name, but you can't just make the same jokes. It's got to be its own thing. So then I went to season 5, episode 3, and obviously I hadn't watched the rest of the show, but from what I gathered, Michael must have gone away and come back at some point. But this episode was about a disco, and I thought it was quite entertaining. There weren't a lot of jokes. There were definitely some characters who were the funny ones, and Kevin was probably the main one for me. Dwight was a funny on occasion, but mainly I didn't really find it that appealing. Maybe I just picked a bad season or a bad episode. Then I went back and watched the UK Office, and as I said, there's no real point me talking about both the UK and US pilot episodes because they're the same thing. But then there's only 2 seasons of the UK Office, so I ended up watching season 1, episode 3, which was the quiz episode. And in this episode, it's pretty much self-explanatory. They go to the pub for a quiz, and one of the characters gets really into the quiz and starts being really arrogant. There were definitely funny moments in this show, in this episode, but the whole character of Finchy is just ridiculously irritating, and I got more angry at the episode than found it funny, and that's definitely the purpose. You're definitely not supposed to like the guy, and there were definitely funny bits throughout it, but all in all, I didn't find any of the episodes that I watched particularly funny. The only thing that really sticks out to me that I found funny was when Gareth finds his stuff has been frozen in jelly. He says that he doesn't trust jelly in the way it moves. And then there's also this bit.
Hey, dude. Give it back.
I'm just using it for a second.
It's got my name on it, Gareth.
Yeah, it says Garrett, actually, but...
Ask if you want to borrow it.
You always say no, mate. What's the point?
Perhaps that's why you should ask.
Gareth, it was just there, okay?
Yeah? That's its home. Leave it there.
Okay.
Philip, get that off him. Get that off him.
Just stay where you are, okay? I'm going to let this go, right, unless you stop acting like a fool.
Well, you won't, so...
Well, I have, so...
What if that kills someone?
Oh, kills... well, they'll think you're the murderer. It's got your name on it.
Why would a murderer put his name on a murder weapon?
To stop people borrowing it.
David?
I hate the fact you bring me down to this. I really do...
I don't know why you're laughing.
Wait, leave her at it. Well done. You carry on. Listen, you bring me down to this, mate.
But apart from those bits in the very first episode, I didn't find anything really that funny. And the other episode I watched, I didn't really find particularly funny either. All in all, I'd probably have to say the main difference between these two shows is that I find the US show to be a lot more happy. Because at the end of every episode, you can see the cast getting, the main ensemble characters getting along and they achieve the goal. Jim and Pam end up getting married, and everything's very cheerful. Whereas in the UK office, it sort of ends in catastrophic failure. Like in the very first episode I was talking about sort of embarrassing himself in the quiz episode, everyone's a bit of an asshole, and Martin Freeman's character ends up losing his shoes. And obviously throughout the show, obviously there's only 2 seasons, but similar to what happens in the US version, Martin Freeman's character announces his love for Dawn and he gets shot down rather tragically. And all in all, I thought it was they're very similar. They're very similar in terms of characters. Obviously, both Michael and David are exactly the same characters, where they try so hard to be funny and liked, but just makes them really obnoxious and unlikable. I'm gonna have to give this again to the UK, just because of how blatantly obvious it was that the US had robbed the pilot episode, and also, I thought there were a few more funnier bits in the UK episodes that I've watched. The ultimate thing that I've noticed from watching all of these shows is the tone. Tone is the main difference between US comedy and UK comedy. In the US, they have an upbeat, willful ignorance as sort of the humour. Like, the characters are doing something blatantly absurd and they don't understand that it's absurd and they're like, why is this funny? But in the UK, it's a lot more pessimistic and self-aware, sarcastic. Like a character will try and get liked and it makes him just so thoroughly unlikable. All the characters are exceptionally flawed. In the UK, also, what you'll notice is there's not really a designated straight man. Whereas in most of the US comedies, there are a straight man. In The Office, that would be Jim. In Brooklyn Nine-Nine, that would probably be Terry. And in Parks and Recreation, it'd be that Polish guy, whatever his name is. In the UK comedy in general, there doesn't tend to be a straight man. All the characters are exceptionally flawed. And that's the main thing. All the flaws in the characters is what makes them entertaining. Like in Red Dwarf, it would be Crichton with his inability to fully act like a human because he's a droid. Or Rimmer because he's just such a cowardly, neurotic smeghead. And of course in the IT crowd, where even like the most normal character, the female boss whose name I've forgotten now and I can't be asked to Google it, even she's very flawed and has no real concept of how to interact with people properly. Certainly more than the other two, but not enough to really make her the straight man of the show. So I guess what it comes down to is the US is happily ignorant and the UK is depressingly accurate. I want to say thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy this and wanted to see more stuff like this, leave a like, subscribe as well. Really helps the channel. And thank you all for watching.